So, Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity is a game that pretty much nobody saw coming, but in hindsight, pretty much everyone should have seen it coming because, it made perfect sense. People were really just kind of itching to know more about what took place in the world of Breath of the Wild before, the Great Calamity took place. Because, as great of a game as Breath of the Wild is, one of the most common complaints of it was the fact that, pretty much any interesting part of that game's story is relegated to flashbacks and also just hidden journals that you could find scattered throughout the game. When you really think about it, the only story that really takes place in in the actual present moment of that game is, Link wakes up, he's woken up by Zelda, he gets his, mission from the Force Ghost of King Rome to go beat Ganon. He meets all of the champions' descendants to learn about the champions and his relationship to them, and then he goes to, beat Ganon. And of course, how that game is structured. You don't even have to do any of that. You don't have to clear a single divine beast. You don't have to pay attention to the story at all. It's possible to literally walk straight from the beginning of the game to the final boss. And, on one hand, that obviously just allowed for a very, very unprecedented degree of freedom when it came to, to the gameplay. But that's kind of the thing with open world games in general. It's just kind of like this push and pull between, if the game is more structured, then it can tell a better story, but, the player doesn't have as much freedom to explore at their own pace in whatever order they want. But, if a game is designed so that the player can explore, and go wherever they want, whenever they want, that means that the story has to be just a lot thinner to just accommodate for the fact that, the player doesn't have to go to any place in any set order. And, the fact that Breath of the Wild kind of, even in the open world subgenre of games, broke new ground, it's clear that, Nintendo has never been known for, for top of the line storytelling, but, Zelda games have been their more plot heavy games, but, it's clear that they made the choice to sacrifice story for gameplay in Breath of the Wild, because, we really, the characters that the game introduced to us were really interesting. We wanted to know more about this version of Zelda. We wanted to know more about all four of the champions and the king, but all we got were just kind of these very brief flashbacks. And even in the DLC for the game, you still just don't know that much about them. And Age of Calamity was its purpose seemed to be to fix that, to kind of fill in the storytelling gaps that fans were hoping for. And the formula of a Warriors game just kind of it fits, it almost fit too well, because it takes place during a war. It's supposed to be this grand epic battle that you only ever hear about in Breath of the Wild but don't ever actually see, and now you see it. So it makes sense to, instead of just making making a prequel to the game that uses the same style of gameplay, a Warriors game makes, just a lot more sense. Because, the thing, Koei Tecmo, the people behind the Dynasty Warriors games, they've just basically been on, over the past couple of years, they've just been on a kick of collaborating with all these different companies and having, of taking well-known game series and just pretty much just infusing the Dynasty Wars style gameplay into them. The first one of these was the first Hyrule Warriors, and that's another thing, how it's interesting how we now have two Hyrule Warriors games, and it's interesting how we're able to kind of have the best of both worlds. Because the original Hyrule Warriors, it was not set in the series timeline at all. It was completely non-canon, and it was kind of just meant to be this big, giant explosion of fan service, bringing together characters and worlds from all corners of the Zelda universe, all the different timelines, and just the roster quadrupled in size by the time the DLC and the definitive edition were all out. So on one hand we got the big giant love letter to fans by that has just this huge ensemble cast, but here we have but then for the second Warriors game, it, it takes kind of the opposite approach, where like it is set within the Zelda continuity. Well, sort of. I will get to that later. But it is more or less set within the continuity of a certain game, and it tries its best, to kind of just completely capture, the vibe of that game. Being Breath of the Wild, the art style is exactly the same. All like the UI, the sound effects, the music sounds, all the music is just remixed versions of existing tracks from Breath of the Wild. Like, it really, like, more than ever, like, this does, like, the best job of truly feeling like, just a sequel to a game that just happens to have the Dynasty Warriors gameplay, as opposed to, a Dynasty Warriors game with, just like a Zelda-themed skin, or a Fire Emblem-themed skin. Because there was Hyrule Warriors, which had Zelda characters. There was Fire Emblem Warriors, which I never played, but a lot of people didn't really like it, mainly because, the roster seemed very limited, because, the main appeal of these Warriors games is that it just has this big ensemble roster, and with Fire Emblem Warriors, it only took from, like, the original, very first game, the one that Marth came from, and the newer ones like Awakening and Fates. So, and then there was also Dragon Quest Heroes, which took characters from different Dragon Quest games. There was, I think, One Piece Warriors. Never seen One Piece, but I think there's been 4 of those, so I can imagine they sell well enough for them to keep making them. And then most recently, there was Persona 5 Scramble, which is story-wise is a direct sequel to Persona 5, and from what I heard, like, that is very similar to Age of Calamity, where like it feels less like just a Dynasty Warriors game with a Persona 5 themed coat of paint, but actually like a Persona 5 sequel that just so happens to have the Dynasty Warriors gameplay. But anyway, I'm getting a little off track here. I'll give you a whole history lesson, but the point is that Koei Tecmo has been doing these collaborations with all these different companies by giving them Warrior spin-offs, and they decided to go back to Hyrule Warriors, not do a sequel, but like just another kind of Hyrule Warriors game. Age of Calamity was the first ever Warriors game that I've played, because, I mean, the gameplay never really looked that appealing to me before, because it was like, okay, fine, it looks super cool to pull off all these combos and flashy attacks and mow down, hordes of enemies, but, how long could I do that before it gets old? But the thing about Age of Calamity, what made me, completely on board with it and, instantly sold on it, was that, okay, I actually care about what's happening, because this is a story that I actually care about. And so, that kind of motivated me to get through the gameplay, and just, this, as you can tell, I'm not going off any script here, I am going off the cuff, but, just to start things off, so this was the first Warriors game that I ever played, so the gameplay was, relatively fresh to me. For someone who has played every single Dynasty Warriors game, plus all the different spin-offs, this might have done nothing for them. But, the gameplay, at least, from a first-timer, it was simple. It wasn't very strategic, but it was a lot of fun, because there was just something inherently incredibly satisfying of just completely just laying waste to giant swaths of enemies all at once. And, I mean, apparently, part of the Warriors series is it's part slasher, part, tactical game. And this one, I mean, there wasn't really a lot of tactics involved, and I can't really speak to other Warriors games, but this one, the only tactic it just kind of boiled down to, like, there are a few points on the map, and you have, usually 3 to 4 characters that you could, swap between on the fly. Just make each character auto-travel to this point on the map that you need to get to, and, and make it so that you could have, 3 characters go to 3 different places, so that all 3 of them are are at places where you need to be in order to progress, and just one by one, just switch between them until all of the missions are cleared and you can move forward. So my tactical skills were never really challenged that much, so it really just came down to just, how fun was it to completely just beat the ever-loving crap out of just mounds of enemies. And it was, there are certainly all these different combos that you can unlock, and the roster isn't quite as huge as the original Hyrule Warriors, because it isn't pulling from, the entire series. It's pulling from characters from Breath of the Wild. There are some that are definitely more fun to play as than others. But to be honest, I think that Link probably is the best one to play as. Just Link with the Master Sword was more or less my go-to. I don't really like playing him with the two-handed weapons. The healing mechanic it's very interesting, but it was just too slow. The spear was really cool. The spear was great, but the sword was kind of my go-to with him. Zelda was okay. So I know that in Smash Ultimate, Sakurai was like, well, we didn't include Breath of the Wild Zelda because she's not really about fighting. Well, whenever the next Smash Brothers comes along, whether that probably another 5, who knows how long years from now, Zelda's moveset needs to be changed completely, because there's no reason for her just to be using like Link's magical powers from Ocarina of Time, because she now has like more than enough abilities on her own to be her own completely unique fighter. Because it's funny because every character in this game has the Sheikah Slate, and it was impressive how every single character has access to the 4 Sheikah Slate runes from Breath of the Wild, except they all work a little differently. Link will just for example, for the bomb, Link will just chuck a bunch of bombs at enemies, but Zelda will just throw this giant walking bomb that will just and Sidon will just hit bombs like baseballs, and just it's very impressive how there are all these different variants on the rune attacks. But with Zelda, she has her rune attacks, but even for her standard attacks, she's using the Sheikah Slate, and it's just so impressive how they're able to craft an entire moveset out of this. And then she's even more fun to use when okay, first of all, spoilers. I'm gonna probably spoil this game. It's been out for a few months, so if you haven't played this, don't listen to this. But if you have, keep listening. But she's even more fun to play as when you unlock her abilities, as once she unlocks her light powers. Unsurprisingly, like Daruk and Yunobo, they were probably among my least favorites because in a game like this that's supposed to be just super just kinetic and fast-paced, they're really super slow. Daruk was definitely better than Yunobo, but I was not a fan of the characters who were heavy and didn't attack very, very quickly. I can go through each of them, but I guess another one of my favorites was Mipha, because she can just pull off insane combos by using her water geyser ability. Another one of my favorites was probably King Rome. I didn't think we'd be able to play as him, but we do, and it's really awesome how he has 2 different weapons that you can just switch between at any point. Urbosa was a ton of fun. Another one of my favorites was Riju. I think that's how I pronounce her name. Her just zipping around with her little walrus buddy. First of all, that's just too amazing to not. The fact that she has a pet walrus and she fights with her pet walrus named Patricia is enough for reason for me to main her. But she's kind of what I like in characters in action games. She's super fast, very agile, can pull off lots of great combos. But she was another one of my favorites. There were a few characters that I didn't unlock just because I'll get to this, but I just didn't care enough to keep playing to unlock them. There was a little robot Terraco, who is pretty much the Zelda equivalent to R2-D2. There's the old monk guy, who I never got to play as. There are the great fairies, who I think are ugly, and I don't want to look at them, so I don't want to play as them. Those great fairies in Breath of the Wild, they have always just something about them. They creep me out. I don't know what it is about them, but I don't want to look at them. I think the only other character I never got to play as was Calamity Ganon, who supposedly isn't that fun based on what other people have said. Well, I think that the game does a really terrific job of just making each character feel unique, whether or not I enjoy playing as them, and how they each have special abilities, and they just have such a wide range of them. Like how Link fires arrows, and Sidon, using the power of confidence, you could counter attacks, and Daruk, he can build up power to just erect stone columns to cause more damage. And then there's Mipha, who has her water geyser ability, which just allows for lots of insane combos. And what's impressive is that that the champions are playable in the game, and then there were the 4 new champions that we see in Breath of the Wild that not in flashbacks, in the actual story. There's Riju, Sidon, Yunobo, and Teba. And what's interesting is that even though that I thought oh god, are they just gonna be kind of like Echo Fighters? They're gonna play very similar to their other counterparts, but with minor differences? No. All 4 of those new champions have entirely unique movesets, and that was real. I was very impressed by that, how like Saidon and Mipha don't feel anything like each other. Yunobo and Daruk, besides being slow, don't feel anything like each other. Even Teba and Revali, who are both birds who fly in the air and use an arrow, somehow they managed to make their movesets feel completely different from one another. I actually like using Teba a lot more than Revali. What's great about this is that, again, like, just the game does such a good job of just naturally incorporating all these elements from Breath of the Wild. In fact, when it comes to the runes, I think that if Nintendo is wise, that for the Breath of the Wild sequel, they should adopt how you select runes from Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. Because one of the other problems with Breath of the Wild is that the inventory was kind of just a pain, because you were just scrolling through stuff. Like, and just to select like a rune, you had to like hold down an L button and keep holding it down as you scroll through it, and it was just annoying. But here, all you do is that you hold down, select a rune, all you do is you hold down one of the shoulder buttons and you press like, you know, A, B, X, or Y. And that is so much easier, so much simpler, so much less cumbersome. And same thing with, like, you know, you could also get like these magical rods by defeating the wizard enemies. You can get a fire rod or an ice rod or an electric rod, and then the other button is dedicated to healing yourself. Like, those are the D-pad buttons. And again, like, I think that for Breath of the Wild 2, and I think I'm gonna do a video, like a full proper video where I talk about all the things I want out of Breath of the Wild 2. And one of them is that they need to fix the inventory, and I think that they should use Age of Calamity as a reference for that, because I think you should be able to, like, kind of what you used to do in other Zelda games, where you can assign, you know, out of all your weapons, you could assign 4 of them to 4 of the D-pad buttons and just hold down L and just select one to equip, as opposed to just scrolling through them. So at least you have like 4 quick select options. And then same thing with the runes, you know. I think that that's something that is far more elegant control scheme. Another, I guess, an issue with the gameplay is the fact that there's not a whole lot of enemy variety, which isn't entirely this game's fault, because Breath of the Wild did not have a lot of enemy variety. It's just, you know, you had your bokoblins and your other enemies, and once you got to a certain point, they were the same enemies, just different colors and stronger. You know, and sometimes, like, you know, the super powerful bosses that take forever to defeat, like, Hinoxes and the giant stand monster, like, you know, those were kind of fun to start off with, but, like, you know, certain enemies, they have that weak point gauge that you have to, you know, to whittle down. And, you know, the boss characters, you have to, you know, wait until they have an opening and deplete their weak point gauge before you can really, you know, deal an attack that does any significant amount of damage. And, like, you have to do this at least, like, 4 or 5 times for some bosses, and it can get pretty repetitive. So, I definitely just enjoyed the moment-to-moment gameplay of slashing through enemies more than the boss battles. And, you know, and the thing about the runes is that, you know, the game makes good use of them. The game makes it so that there are certain situations where using a certain rune will kind of leave an enemy open for attack. How, like, you know, like, if an enemy is, like, shielding themselves, use a bomb to break their shield. If the enemy is, like, throwing, like, a metallic weapon at you, use Magnesis to catch it and throw it back at them. You can use Cryonis to, like, stop them in their tracks if they're charging towards you, and that leaves them open for an attack. And the thing is that, you know, there's a very short window of time when you have to do that, so if you missed it, you know, just, you know, if your muscle memory isn't right, like, oh, I meant to press this button, I meant to press the Cryonis button, but I accidentally pressed the Stasis button, then you have to just wait around until there's another opening. So, but, you know, it's good that they at least thought of natural ways to incorporate the mechanics of Breath of the Wild into Age of Calamity. And that applies also to, like, the system of, like, leveling up. How, you know, the way there are 2 ways to level up characters. You can just do the side missions, which, those, I didn't really enjoy those that much, because there just wasn't, you know, much of a story. They didn't have any real story behind them. It just more or less boiled down to just, you know, defeat these enemies until the objective is accomplished. But what you could also do is just, you know, you can save up rupees and level up characters that way. And then you're also able to level up weapons. And you can also just complete these side quests where if you know, collect enough materials by defeating enemies, you will, you know, get recipes for meals to give you certain abilities. You will just get, you know, upgrades to your own attacks. So there are all these different ways to level up your character. But for a while, I was just able just to kind of just naturally keep in pace with what level the game was expecting me to be at. But then once I got to, like, kind of like the final third of the game, it got to a point where, like, you know, just doing missions wasn't cutting it. I was starting to become like 4 or 5 levels underleveled, and I would have to like, take like, a good handful of gameplay hours to just kind of collect rupees, do side quests, collect materials to get the characters at least within 2 or 3 levels of where we were supposed to be. And that just kind of slowed the pacing down a little. But overall, I would say that the gameplay, it's not super deep. This is definitely a game where you can just kind of turn your brain off and have fun with, but it was still fun, and I appreciate all the different attack styles they were able to come up with, despite the fact that they easily could have just like, made the 2 sets of champions clones of each other. But again, what really motivated me to play Age of Calamity was that there was a real story here. And like, so the story, like, I was enjoying it up to a point. So on one hand, like, for the first like 50% or so of the game, it's pretty much following what was happening in the, in the backstory of Breath of the Wild. It kind of skips over the stuff we saw in flashbacks, but it just kind of fills in those gaps. And the stuff I liked the most was simply the fact that we got to spend more time with these characters. We got to actually see a bond form between the 4 champions. Like, the thing about Breath of the Wild is that the story was mostly, it was more telling and less showing. So it was like, oh, these champions were super strong, and they were the only ones who could really stand up against Ganon, and they were the obvious choice of Power of the Divine Beast, and they were a team, and like, the game was telling me all this stuff, but it really wasn't showing me it. But now we see, okay, now that we actually got to get behind the wheel and play as each of the champions. Like, yes, they are incredibly powerful and can do these incredible things. This is why they were selected to be these powerful warriors. Link is still silent, and I'm probably very close to alone in this opinion. I think that now that Zelda games have voice acting, that Link should talk. I don't care about like feeling like I'm in the game. I just want Link to have personality. I just want Link to actually talk and feel like more than just like an empty vessel, because like I don't care about the whole angle of like, oh, he's supposed to represent the player. Like I feel like that like the best Zelda stories like Skyward Sword and Wind Waker are the ones where Link shows a bit more personality. And I want him, now that like they call him Link. You don't just name him anymore. Like now the characters actually call him by his name, Link, so you feel like he's not just an avatar. He actually lives in this world. So why is he not talking? And the thing about the story is that it's more Zelda's story than Link's. If there's one character who really got a lot of great development, it was Zelda, and even like her voice act. Like, the thing about her voice actor in Breath of the Wild is that she speaks with a British accent, but she's voiced by an American voice actor who talks in a British accent. Why not just get a British voice actor? Just get one of the people from the Xenoblade games. But the voice work for pretty much all the characters was noticeably better than Breath of the Wild. It's still at an A tier. I think that when you look at how there are certain games that actually kind of just go the extra mile and get like actual like A-lister talent to voice these characters, I want to see Ganon voiced by Mark Hamill. I want to see Zelda voiced by, if she's going to have a voice actor that was British, I want to see it voiced by like Emily Blunt. And I want to see Link voiced by, I don't know who would voice it, maybe like Elijah Wood? I have no idea. But like that's something that'll probably never happen, but like I feel like that this is supposed to be one of Nintendo's like top budget series, and I think that it should get like the top budget treatment. But anyway, it was just good to see all these characters interact with one another, and they had like a more believable camaraderie, and we actually got to see like what exactly Zelda's problem was, because she felt like that everyone was kind of living up to their potential and she wasn't. And she has to kind of realize that, because she's very insecure, even though that she has her own abilities besides, her light powers, which she eventually gains. Because one of the major story differences is that in Breath of the Wild, she doesn't tap into her powers until the very last moment, until after, like, the war's lost and the champions have been killed and Link is defeated, that she is able to, to tap into her powers and just be able to hold Ganon back from just completely, wrecking the entire planet. But here, because of certain story differences, she unlocks it a lot sooner, so you can actually, for the purpose of being able to actually play as her while she has these powers, which is a very great moment. It just feels really awesome. It's very cool to see just her just kind of build up confidence as the story goes on, and one of the new characters here, well, not new, but basically new, is Impa. How she's in the original Breath of the Wild, but she's she's much older, and she just kind of just talks to Link at the beginning of the game and tells him, catches him up on what's happened over the past 100 years, and that's all we see of her. But here, she's younger. What's cool about her is that, usually she has like the role of like Zelda's advisor, but she's more of like a mentor figure. Here she's basically Zelda's BFF. Like, she's like, there's this one part where Zelda's being hard on herself, and she's like, no, you are awesome. You got us out of this mess. And I thought that was really cool how Zelda basically has like a BFF in this game, and someone to actually have a strong bond with who isn't Link. But, where my problems with the story come in is just the fact, is the time travel stuff. From the very beginning, when people first found out about the little robot and the fact that, oh, okay, he's traveling back in time here, like, it was clear that, okay, this is not gonna be like a one-to-one retelling of the past events of Breath of the Wild. But I was still hoping that, okay, fine, there's gonna be like some time travel shenanigans just so things can play out differently for the sake of just the player being able to see certain things happen, but we'll still get, kind of like our tragic ending where, where the heroes don't win. And but the problem is that the part where the story just completely deviates from where Breath of the Wild was is when the 4 champions are about to be defeated by the 4 Blight Ganons, and then at the very last second, Sidon, Riju, Yunobo, and Teba show up through time portals and defend them and save them so they don't die there. I mean, and in the moment I was like, whoa, what the heck is going on? Because up until that very moment, I had absolutely no idea that these 4 characters were even in the game. So that was a complete surprise to me, because nowadays it's near impossible to not be spoiled on stuff like that. But I had no idea that Sidon was in the game, and then 5 seconds later I was playing as him, and that was a really cool moment. But on the other hand, it's like, okay, so like I was like, all right, so we're not gonna see them die how they said they died in Breath of the Wild, but I understand why they introduced this plot device of time travel so that the 4 new champions could travel back in time and actually, fight alongside the original champions. And that was cool. I mean, the game needed as big of a roster as it can get, and it was cool to see all of these characters we've come to know across Breath of the Wild fight together. But on the other hand, it's like, okay, fine, we're not gonna get the death scene that we saw in Breath of the Wild, but I guess maybe later down the line they'll have to sacrifice themselves. But as the story went on, and I guess also just as an aside, the reason why I haven't mentioned Astor yet, like the new character, is because like he's nothing. Like, he had a lot of missed potential. He could have been like I just watched Zack Snyder's Justice League the other day. Like, he could have been like the Steppenwolf to Ganon's dark side. Someone who's doing his bidding and like is like, I don't know, maybe looking for redemption, or or just looking to for a higher position. But no, he's just like this random zealot who thinks he's the chosen prophet of Ganon. But it turns out no, he's just some schmuck who Ganon was using, until he had his full power. But anyway, but then, as the story went on, I realized, like, hold on, this isn't really a Breath of the Wild prequel, and then it gets to the point where, Terrako, the robot, sacrifices himself, and they defeat Harbinger Ganon, and it's like, oh, Harbinger Ganon is from some other timeline, and it's like, wait a second. And then we get to Calamity Ganon, and it's like, okay, so I'm like, wait, what is happening here? We're not supposed to be, like, is this it? Okay, fine, we're fighting Calamity Ganon. What is the game going to do to, make it so this is not they all lived happily ever after? But no, you just keep playing, and it's like, nope, Link defeats Calamity Ganon, Zelda, seals him away, the old champions go back to their old timeline, and they all lived happily ever after the end. And it's like, wait a minute. So, turns out, this is not a prequel to Breath of the Wild. This is like a what-if scenario. This is a completely separate timeline where the events of Breath of the Wild never even happened because Calamity Ganon didn't ever win. And like I know this is Nintendo and they're still technically supposed to be a kids company, but like I feel like they had the option to just do something they've never done before, to actually tell a story where like the heroes don't win. And I'm not saying like, oh, you're trying to be such an edgelord by saying, oh, this ending sucks because it wasn't all sad and no one died. Like, no, I have nothing wrong with happy endings, but one of the biggest things about Breath of the Wild is the fact that, you know, 100 years of, it's like Avatar, it's like, you know, when the world needed him most, he vanished. 100 years have gone by, Link has been in, you know, in his cryogenic sleep, and Hyrule is on the brink of destruction because Zelda has almost run out of strength to hold back Calamity Ganon, because Link failed 100 years ago, and the champions died, and the King of Hyrule died. And here, this game just, Nintendo had the opportunity to, like, to really dive into that and just make this something truly powerful, and they just kind of chickened out of it. They were like, you know what? We don't really want to go this way. We're just gonna set this in a completely separate timeline. And that was disappointing to me, because once I realized that what happens in this game is not at all consequential to what happens in Breath of the Wild and the series as a whole, and how it might affect Breath of the Wild 2, I stopped caring. And that's the reason why, like, you know, after you beat Calamity Ganon, the game's like, oh, but there's more. You can keep playing to a lot of other characters, and you can gather enough parts to rebuild Terraco. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but I don't care, because this game is not in any way canon. Because, like, with the original Hyrule Warriors, yeah, it wasn't canon, but it was still like this super fun explosion of fan service. But this is like, I mean, it's almost kind of like false advertising. Like, Nintendo marketed this as, okay, you know, finally, you guys get to see what happened 100 years ago. Except, no, JK, actually, this isn't really a prequel. It's just an alternate timeline where the champions succeed and they never die, and Ganon never ravages Hyrule. And it's like, again, I get why they wanted to incorporate time travels, so they could kind of retell certain things. They wanted to have an excuse to bring the old and new champions together, and I really liked, you know, the bonding that formed especially between Daruka and Yunobo, and like Rivali, where it's, and Teba's like, this guy, this prick is the great champion who I've been looking up to. But, you know, like, they could have had that. They could have made it so, like, you know, maybe, you know, once Terraco has become corrupted by Calamity Ganon, maybe, you know, he sends the four new champions back to the present. And then, you know, the King of Hyrule and the four champions, they had to sacrifice themselves in order to, you know, to hold off Ganon for a little while. And then Link, he tries to fight him, but he fails. And there's like a mission where Zelda has to kind of carry Link to the Shrine of Resurrection and has to fight Ganon off as maybe Ganon is chasing her. And, you know, that's the end. And maybe, and, you know, and just to, like, you know, to be continued in Breath of the Wild 2. I don't know. But the point is, the story could have mostly stayed the same. Like, I like the change of Zelda accessing her power earlier, because that means you can actually see it more. And, like, you know, it was just, you get a sense of just how powerful she is. But, like, again, they could have had their time travel stuff and still ended it with, you know, not a happily ever after. But they did. And that was a missed opportunity. And, like, just the second I realized this is what happens, I didn't care anymore. I stopped caring. I was like, I don't care. Which is why I wasn't at all motivated to play any of the post game. It definitely brought down my you know, experience as a whole a certain amount, but, you know, I don't hate the game. At the end of the day, Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, still a ton of fun, still a nice, you know, return to the Breath of the Wild world to kind of tide us over to, hopefully, fingers crossed that Breath of the Wild 2 comes out this year. It's already been confirmed that we're going to see it, we're going to hear news about it this year, but if those rumors about the Switch Pro, Switch Plus, new Switch, whatever it ends up being called, if those are true, then, and if that's coming out this year, then there's just no way that Breath of the Wild 2 won't be a launch title for that new version of the Switch. So, I mean, if you're burnt out on Warriors games, this probably won't do anything with you. If you've never played one before and you are a Zelda fan, this is probably a good one to start with. Either that or, I mean, the original Hyrule Warriors is also on Switch. So, I mean, you could play either. It's a good game, but it could have been something truly special had they not decided to just make this like a non-canon thing. So, the other game I'm going to talk about is Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury. So, I mean, just to clarify something, I 100% in 3D World on the Wii U. I think it's an excellent game. I think that a lot of people gave it a lot of, like, flack because they were, you know, at the time, Super Mario Odyssey was nowhere close to being announced yet. And the latest 3D Mario was 3D Land, which already, like, you know, people liked that game, but it was not really, it didn't feel like a grand adventure because it was on a handheld and it had a structured level format where it wasn't really any one cohesive world. It was the structure of a 2D Mario game with the mechanics of a 3D Mario game. And 3D World was kind of more of that. I think 3D World is still a far better game just because the level design is a lot more creative, and the music is far better, and it just has a lot more creativity put into it. But it definitely, it wasn't quite like Sunshine or 64 or Galaxy 2, because it wasn't like this grand adventure. But now that we got Super Mario Odyssey, which was kind of like, it was a return to the more open world style of gameplay of 64 and Sunshine, and it just felt like another 3D Mario game that felt like a grand epic adventure like Galaxy 1 and 2. So now that we've had that game, I think, people we're going to be more, accepting of 3D World for what it is, rather than what it isn't, because even if it's not this grand open world adventure, it's still just a really terrific platformer, and I'm just surprised it took this long to come to the Switch. Mario Kart 8's been on there for years. Pretty much the only two notable Wii U games that have yet to be ported to Switch are Xenoblade Chronicles X and Yoshi's Woolly World, and I can only imagine those two are only a matter of time. I know there's also Nintendo World and Kirby and the Rainbow Curse, but unfortunately I think those two games are just too heavily reliant on the gamepad to really work on Switch. Same thing with Star Fox Zero. If they're gonna do a Star Fox on Switch, they'll just make an entirely new Star Fox. I don't know if they'll do that, because it seemed like Star Fox Zero might have put the series on the back burner once more for who knows how long. But yeah, I'm surprised that it took pretty much 4 years into the system's lifespan for us to get a 3D World port, especially since Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, the 3D World spin-off, came to the Switch 2 years ago. So it's like, this is weird, Captain Toad is here, why is 3D World not here? But now it is. And I'll just say, this is probably the single most ambitious Wii U port that we have gotten. Because, some of the Wii U ports, like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, actually had a pretty substantial amount of new content added to them. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe had a handful of new characters, a handful of new cars, and a completely redone battle mode, which was awesome. It was a little disappointing that there were no new race courses, but the fact that they actually went back and completely fixed battle mode to make it, actually fun, made it such a better game than the original version. And then there's ports like Bayonetta 2, which is pretty much the exact same game. There's Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, which is basically the same game, except you could play as Funky Kong, who's just super easy mode. But 3D World, I thought maybe, okay, if they port 3D World, I thought they was gonna port it and call it a day, which would have been fine, because 3D World on its own is still a terrific game. But no, they went above and beyond. I thought, okay, if they're gonna have new content, they'll add a couple of new levels, because, that was the rumor. Mario 3D All-Stars, which I'm recording this on March 31st, so rip Mario. Mario 3D All-Stars was rumored for a while, and then there was also rumored that there would be a 3D World port coming to Switch, and it would have a few new levels. So I was thinking, oh, okay, it'll be a new world with a couple of new levels. But no, for the Switch version of 3D World, I played the first world and a half, and it's basically the same game, except for the fact that the characters run much faster, which just makes it a lot more fun to play. A lot more fun to play. It just makes the game feel a lot more fast-paced. And that's pretty much the only gameplay change they made to the main 3D World game. But that's not the reason why. If it was just 3D World, I would have been happy that it was there so people who didn't play could play it, but I wouldn't have picked it up. What made me pick it up was the Bowser's Fury campaign, and this kind of blew me away. I was not expecting a port to have just this much effort put into it, because Bowser's Fury, it's basically this hybrid between Mario Odyssey and Mario 3D World, and it does some things that other 3D Mario games haven't done at all. First of all, in Bowser's Fury, Mario has full 360-degree movement as opposed to the 8 directions, and that's the one thing that bugs me about this. The one thing that would have made this the perfect, well, two things. One thing that would have made this the perfect version of the game is a playable Yoshi, because Yoshi's the GOAT, and I don't understand. If they should have added at least one new character to the main game, and I don't understand why Yoshi isn't here, because Yoshi should be in everything, because Yoshi is the best. And anyway, the thing that would have made this a perfect port was if the full 360-degree movement was in the main game, because that's the one thing that just made controlling the characters not feel quite as smooth as other 3D Marios, because you can't run in a perfect circle. It's just one of 8 predetermined directions. But since Bowser's Fury has this more open world structure, more in line with Sunshine and Odyssey and 64, they give you back the 360-degree movement. It's very jarring to go between the two campaigns, because Mario controls so much better in one of them. But the thing with Bowser's Fury is it's pretty much if 3D World was the 3D Mario game people had wanted it to be back in 2013, because it pretty much feels like a far more conventional 3D Mario. You're not clearing courses, you're collecting, you know, it's this time it's cat shines. In other 3D Marios, there were these more open-ended environments, but here there is zero hub world, because every single area is just interconnected, and you travel to one of them by riding on Plessie. And I mean, if Plessie, I can only imagine that the next proper 3D Mario is Odyssey 2, and if Plessie is not in Odyssey 2, I will be very upset, because I don't know if Plessie's a boy or a girl. I'll call him a boy, because I don't know. He looks like a boy to me. He is one of the most fun ways, he's one of the most fun modes of transportation in any Mario game ever. Like, sometimes I just want to ride around on him and do his giant dives because it's just fun. And I think this has the potential to really make the next 3D Mario game something truly new if they decide to draw inspiration from it. And the other thing about Bowser's Fury, you know, obviously the main thing about Bowser's Fury is Fury Bowser, who, it's just funny how, you know, in some games Bowser is this total goofball. And then in some games he's like this amazing father to his son, and then in some games he's like legitimately intimidating. Like you know, here he gets corrupted by Bowser Jr.'s black goop paint, and he actually is kind of terrifying looking. And we've never seen this kind of mechanic in a Mario game where like you periodically have to fight off this boss over and over again. And it's fun the first time, and like, but you need to rely on him to like get certain shines, and after like the 20th time it just starts to get a little annoying, and it's like you're just waiting for him to go away because you just want to get back to what you're doing, because it's pretty hard just to keep going on with whatever objective you're trying to clear with Bowser constantly on your tail, shooting fire at you and raining down those giant blocks, and fighting him as Kaiju Cat Mario is pretty fun. But even that gets first of all, also like the final battle where like he's still giant but he's not corrupted anymore, but you still have to fight him. That might be like one of my favorite Mario boss battles ever. Like, it was actually like genuinely epic. I think I liked it. Like 3D World had a pretty good final boss, but this was even better. But the thing about and another thing about what makes Bowser's Fury so unique is the fact that like the thing about like it's the power-ups. The thing about power-ups in 3D Mario games is that they've always been very situational. Like in Galaxy and Galaxy 2, you can't just equip a power-up and take it into whatever level you want. You know, there are levels dedicated to you using the Fire Flower, and once the level is done, you lose that power-up. And you know, like Cloud Mario and Spring Mario, it's like they're designed for very specific situations. And also in Odyssey, you have a little more freedom in Odyssey, because you could choose which enemy to capture and take that enemy wherever with you, but it's still very situational, where it's like most of them, there are exceptions, but like, you know, like the water octopus thing is actually really fun to move around in. But with most of the capture abilities in Mario Odyssey, you're using them to get to where you need to go and get the moon you need to get, not necessarily because like it's actually that fun to control them. But here, like, this is the first open world 3D Mario where you have like access to your traditional arsenal of power-ups like the Fire Flower and the Super Leaf and the Boomerang Flower and the Super Bell, and you can use them at any time and kind of just apply them to whatever situation you're in. You can use them at any time. And this is something totally new, because, you know, 3D World and 3D Land, you know, they had that too, where it was like 3D Mario, where you could use any power-up at any time. But those were more linear levels. But here, like, there's so much unfounded potential here because it's a story campaign. I wasn't expecting a full game out of this. But like, you know, like, okay, how do I get this more easily? Can I use the Fire Flower? Can I use the Tanuki Leaf? And you can use the Tanuki Leaf to cover huge amounts of ground. You could, you know, okay, you know what? It's easier for me to get to this by just climbing up a wall with the Super Bell. You could reach this thing with the Boomerang Flower, and just, I think that it makes Mario more versatile than ever, and that's something I would love to see in, maybe not Odyssey 2, because Odyssey 2 probably will just reuse the capture mechanic, but maybe the 3D Mario after that, I think, really should just fully embrace this, because like, if Bowser's Fury was like a full-fledged game, it would probably be better than Odyssey, for being honest. Like, I think that this has the core structure of Bowser's Fury has the potential to be like an even better game than Odyssey. And Odyssey is great, but again, just the fact that just the mechanic of going to whatever world with zero menus or hub worlds, and the whole concept of being able to use any power-up at any time is really... I think Nintendo really, you know, really is tapping into something truly new with Mario, and I want to see a full game based around it. But, and also, I guess I didn't mention Bowser Jr. because, I don't know, he's there. I never did co-op, and he was useful for, like, getting some of the cat shards to get one of the cat shines when you don't want to go all the way over there, and getting power-ups. But, you know, I just kind of forgot he was there most of the time. I set him to, like, him helping you a little bit, so he took care of some enemies, and that's it. But overall, like, just, again, I'm very, very impressed by just how all-out Nintendo went to create this entirely new campaign for Bowser's Fury. Because another thing is what made it a little better than Odyssey is the fact that, you know, Odyssey was more about exploration, and Bowser's Fury has the exploration, but I feel like it has, like, it has more of that tight, thoughtfully designed platforming that 3D World had. And Odyssey had some of that, but not as much as this. So, that's pretty much all I have to say about these two games. My next main video will be another video game related one. It is actually, so it's a review for Origami King, and it's a kind of a special video because unlike my other videos, I didn't edit this one myself. She used it as the thumbnails, but she is fully editing this next video of mine, so it's gonna look a little different. She is, you know, she's great at editing, so she has a different style than me. But I haven't seen the completed product yet. I've recorded it, but I'm very much looking forward to how that turns out. So that'll be the next video you see me in. I say this every time. I don't have my sign off is I have no catchy sign off. So everybody out there, have a pleasant night.